Hello dear fans. Who the Egyptians considered a sacred animal. Since ancient times, people have worshipped these or those animals, which are totems for them. The connection of people with the animal world turned out to be so close that it existed in different eras, passing from one generation to another. For example, this was the case in ancient Egypt. Instructions. Step 1. In the original world order, all the existing deities were identified by the Egyptians with animals and were depicted exclusively in their forms. A little later, some gods began to be depicted by the Egyptians in zoomorphic forms, i.e. like people animals, for example, with the body of a lion and the head of a man. It is curious that the ancient Egyptians never identified the animals themselves with the gods and did not consider them as the supreme forces. An exception can be called only those cases when a certain animal was considered the embodiment of the soul of a particular deity, for example, a black bull named Nevis, which has common features with a bull named Apis. Step 2. The animals revered by the ancient Egyptians were diverse: birds, ungulates, reptiles, mammals, and even insects. For example, ancient people had cults of a bull, a falcon, a cat, a kite, an ibis, a crocodile, and even a scarab beetle. It often happened that a particular sacred animal, revered by some Egyptians, was absolutely not revered by others. In this case, sacred animals could be killed, which often entailed enmity between the inhabitants of certain localities and territories. By the way, hunting for sacred birds has always been prohibited, and for lions exclusively on holidays concerning the goddess Bast, revered by the Egyptians. Step 3. The cult of sacred cows and bulls was associated with the fact that these animals helped people in agricultural work. They plowed on bulls day and night. These animals personified fertility and agriculture. The most revered bull was Apis. The Egyptians believed that he impregnated the heavenly cow, which brings the golden calf, the sun, into the world. Among the cult of mythical sacred birds, the most revered were the great Goggoton and Vienna. Of the real-life birds, the falcon, the kite and the ibis were sacred. Crocodiles were worshipped by the Egyptians mainly in Thebes and Fayum, Libyan desert. These reptiles personified the god of the Nile waters, Sebek. The Egyptians believed that crocodiles could control river floods that brought fertile silt to their lands. Step 4. Cats were sacred animals everywhere and were revered by the ancient Egyptians everywhere, and especially in Bubastis. It was believed that Kosha is the goddess Bast. The veneration of lions was based on the power of the lioness goddesses and symbolized the power of the pharaoh and the power of the goddess Sekhmet. Pigs in ancient Egypt were considered unclean animals associated with Set, but later they began to be compared to the sky. Some residents also venerated them. The veneration of hippos was associated with the cult of Torth, but this cult never received widespread popularity. Jackals in ancient Egypt were associated with the god Anubis, with the desert. The scarab dung beetle was also considered a sacred animal. His cult was associated with the cult of Khepri. The Egyptians believed that these beetles could spontaneously reproduce. Images of these insects served as amulets that protected people from evil and poisonous bites. Step 5. Despite their worship of animals, some of them still had to be killed. For example, in some areas of ancient Egypt, residents had to kill crocodiles. And the sacred animals themselves were to blame. So many crocodiles were bred that they began to pose a real threat to the lives of people and other sacred animals, for example, bulls and cows. It is curious that the Egyptians buried the deceased sacred animal with all honors. The animal was embalmed, placed in a sarcophagus, and buried at temples. For example, dead cats were buried in special sacred tombs in Bubastis, bulls were interred in the place where they died, and dead cows were generally thrown into the Nile River. Thanks for watching.